Welcome to Pop.0 with Bryan Chaffin and John Kheit.
Today is Wednesday, March 7th, 2018, and this is a video podcast for the Mac Observer. I'm Bryan Chaffin, editor-in-chief for TMO, and we've got two people besides me today. Let's start with the bald one.
Well, let's start with you're still lying. This is not a podcast. It will never be a podcast because
totally video podcast.
It is a total battle of wills to who care less.
It's going to be
making it a video podcast, and I guarantee you will lose in this.
It's going to be a video podcast.
And I'm John Kheit, and for some insane reason, someone so much our betters has decided to do this show. It is beyond inexplicable. The wonderful, I would say, outside of one other person in my life, is the single person with the most, what's the right word that won't offend you? I'm just gonna say it. The most lustfully attractive laugh in all of podcasting, easily.
I was really afraid.
I don't know what it is about. Genuinely charming, and it makes you want to get nearer to the source of that laughter. And I mean this in a really sincere way. You know, like when people like they're smiling and they're talking, but you can tell they're angry at you. Like all that emotion always translates like you.
I call that Pop.0. But go ahead.
Exactly. It's like the pissy attitude that is behind your fake smile.
Exactly.
Whereas when Kelly does it, it's not just the genuineness, because that's almost cliche. There is just something that has its own magnetic force that's there. Anyway, Kelly, I don't know what you were thinking by doing this show, but thank you for doing the show.
Kelly Guimont is the person that John is talking about.
Yeah.
At Verso on the Twitters.
Oh my goodness. And occasional explainy post over at Mac Observer, and on the Daily Observations podcast, keeping Bryan from having to do shows all the live long day on Wednesdays.
This is true, but now you're doing the show all the live long day on this particular Wednesday.
Well, no, I only did 2, and you're doing 2, so that counts.
Yeah, fair enough.
So that works. So I'm just here to tell Johnny he's wrong because I got tired of hassling him in the chat.
It's pretty reasonable.
I suspect that phrase that I'm wrong is going to come up quite frequently on this podcast. That said, there's one other comment. You know what's interesting is I didn't realize this about Bryan, because when I first met Bryan and in our kind of interactions together, I always found Bryan to be a super positive, optimistic type person. And I say that genuinely. And then I saw it, and it just proves that everything is relative, because then I saw him in context of Jeff and others on other podcasts and whatnot, and they bring him on to be the curmudgeon, and I'm like, what the heck? And then I realized, yes, this is a case of extreme relativism, right? Like, relative to the shit excuse for a human being that I am, Bryan is effervescent. Apparently.
Well, I am a
truly effervescent person on the show.
I am a generally positive person, and I am absolutely, and I do not mean this in a complimentary way towards myself. I am willfully optimistic. I not only see the glass as half full, I'm planning on it being half full, and really I can probably plan on it being somehow magically full by the end of whatever time it is that I needed to drink the liquids of that content. I'm sure it'll just happen, and everything will be just fine.
Well, this is a nice segue for our topics today, because as always we have 3 topics and we're lying. The first of which I'm sure you'll have nothing but positive things to say about iPhone addiction. The second of which is going to be generally shenanigans, but it's hopefully I've been dying to ask Kelly a bunch of questions on a bunch of topics, and maybe she has questions or answers or whatever she wants to get into. It's a free for all. And the third thing is we're going to discuss kind of the general state of television. We've done this before a bit, but I think Kelly will bring some fresh blood into it, and Bryan seems to have a new bone to pick.
Oh, it's not new.
It's not new. No,
He's been gnawing at that bone for a while.
It's well picked.
It's new to you, John. But
yes.
So you will get to enjoy it. Congratulations.
But I do enjoy your thoughts. So anyway, with that, unless someone else has another rat hole we'd like to enter, I wrote an article about this whole iPhone addiction, new news cycle that's going on, about how Apple is big and bad and horrible for addicting us, and in particular, there's a group of I'm just going to go with kids at Stanford that made a group titled SAAD, SSAAD, Stanford Students Against Addictive Devices. Yet everything is talking about Apple.
Which makes me, by the way, both sad and mad, and makes me think of mad.
Dude, by the way, you got to see what's amazing is the shit state of the press that picks up on these these bumpkins, really, these bumpkins picking up on these kids and making it news. Because if you see what they put out, right, it's a PDF that I link into actually, I'll just show it. If you see what they put out there, kind of as their press release, it looks like a fucking ransom note. Like, it's just children gluing shit to a postcard particle board, putting together their incredible.
Show it. Let's see it. You mentioned that, and I kept meaning to go look at it, and have not.
So here you go. Here we go. This is literally from their site, and that's what it looks like. Because when
we're not seeing it.
It helps to actually push the button. George Jetson's
108 minutes, brother.
108 minutes. I'm telling you.
Yeah. So there it is. That's what they put out.
Doesn't look like a ransom note. It looks like a fax.
At least it is in Comic Sans, but that's about the only positive thing I can probably say about it.
All right, we can disagree about whether or not it looks like a ransom note, but clearly highly professional work that should be taken super seriously by all the media, who didn't capture this story simply because they can clickbait the world, because every time you yell Apple in a internet, the world will come running for clicks.
Which is my first complaint, which is, why are we still talking about this? Because this has been making the rounds of Apple press for, I want to say ever, and I know it hasn't been ever, but it's been like a month now since whatever the group was came out and was like, people really like their phones and that's just bad. And I don't get it. And is it because I'm just old enough to have remembered growing up without the internet? So first of all, thank God my childhood is not online. But second of all, I know how to put my phone down and walk away. I know how to put my phone in do not disturb. I know how to set it face down on the table or drop it in my purse when I'm out to dinner and have a conversation with the person in front of me, because the person in front of me is obviously more interesting than my phone, or I wouldn't have bothered to leave the house. Am I apparently the only person who knows how to do this and knows how to be bored and stand in line at the grocery store and be people watching, which is way funner than Angry Birds or whatever the hell?
So it's interesting that you said that know how to be bored. By the way, I listened to your podcast on the Menu Bar podcast, which is an excellent podcast. And their interview with you was beyond really, really good, because it wasn't kind of just normal, here's your resume, here's what you're doing, kind of punch the card stuff. It was really just insightful in a human way that can advance a human being to just think about it. And one of the topics, I forget which one of the fellows on the podcast mentioned, is they were playing with laser pointers to listen to Pink Floyd just because they were so freaking bored, and it was okay to be bored.
Yeah.
Being bored is not somehow some kind of transgression in life that someone owes for if you enter that state. And so
I feel like we're losing it, and we need not to, because boredom's important. It matters. Boredom is where your brain is churning on other stuff while you're doing whatever. And if you're watching TV, you might be thinking about what you're watching, which we'll talk about later. So that's not a good way to do it. It's one of those things like you always get a good idea in the shower, or you get a good idea in the car, and it's because you're occupying your brain with something else. So like if you're standing in line at the store, like people watching might be kind of fun, and it might give your brain enough time in like autopilot to make whatever the connection is.
Listen, I'm calling Shenanigans because what you consider an appropriate state of boredom was orders of magnitude less time to yourself than just the generation before, maybe even a half generation before you came along. Right. And so, I mean, while there may be value in boredom, saying that we are somehow at some horrible state of a lack of boredom today, to me, doesn't have a lot of relative merit.
Well, I mean, after me, I don't mean everybody. Like because I don't know a lot of people who are in, say, like the upper end of my generation or the previous generation to me, who whip out their phones if they have 90 seconds to sit and do a thing, or are waiting in line for more than a minute or two. Like, I don't know a lot of older people who just pull out their phones and do whatever. Lots of people younger than me do. This is just a thing that I notice out in the world.
But I used to do that with books. My point, you're doing the thing where the woman, and I know John's heard me mention this. I mentioned this on the show. I don't know if you've been around for this particular rant, Kelly, but the woman on NPR who is complaining about rap music and rap lyrics and how worthless they are, and it's terrible, and it's all these bad things. And oh, sure, her parents said that about her music, but that was different because her music was awesome. And you're doing that same thing.
Well, I'm taking. It's a broad brush, and I know that I'm doing that. Like, I'm the first to admit, overall, my noticing in the world, and I know that I'm an edge case. I live in Portland, and whatever else. Like, start there. I live in Portland, but. Like, and I know that, but like overall, it seems like it's people younger than me who will pull it out at the slightest, rather than just sort of stand there and look.
So, Portland was surprisingly a really nice town when I went through, but I disagree with Bryan. I don't think it's the same thing. I think you could try to see it as the same thing, but let me put it this way, kind of as advancing the human state. Mm-hmm. When I went. And drove around the country, I had a lot of time to turn my brain off. And I had probably 7 or 8 new business ideas that I came up with, which are really valuable. I solved a lot of problems not trying, exactly like Kelly said. There's value to that. Now, I think there's also value to what you said, Bryan, which is, who the fuck are you to tell me how much time I need to be bored or not? Like, I'll dose that out.
That's not what I said. What I said was that.
That's what I'm saying. All right.
We have evolving standards of what counts as that.
But what you're doing is you're talking about the woman on NPR who was judging, and I'm not judging. I'm just making a statement. I'm not saying it's terrible that nobody's bored anymore. I'm just saying it seems like this is what's happening, is that people younger than me have no capacity to stand around and do this. And I didn't say, oh, it's terrible.
First of all, I'm not just meeting you. Second of all, I saw the judge's robes from here.
I'm absolutely not judging.
In the wind.
It's just a thing that a thing that I feel like I've noticed. I'm not saying, oh, youth today. Like, I save that for other stuff. Like, I do that to be sure, but I'm not doing it now. That's what I'm saying.
No, there's this weird, bizarre cultural thing that's been adopted in our culture. Is like, you can't judge me. Let me assure you that not only can I have.
I already have.
I so agree with that.
Continue to do so. I endlessly.
Listen, John, I don't know where this started. I don't know where this added this thing that somehow people should be free of judgment ever came about. I don't understand it. It makes no sense. It defies the human condition. Right. This is what we do. We judge each other.
And that's why we got here.
I'm not saying that our judgments are always right by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that and a lot of times what we do with those judgments can be awful, but what we do is we judge each other. This happens all the time, and it should happen all the time. We should always be reflective of those around us, and I'm sorry, we should always be reflecting on those around us as well as ourselves. We should be judging ourselves as well. So yeah.
even though you just shamed Kelly about being judgmental.
No, I shamed Kelly for pretending to not be judgmental. That's what I did.
I see. I see there, history rewriter. All right. Anyway, so we kind of got off a tangent, which is
well, okay. So just to reiterate my point without judging, I'm not trying to be judgy about it, but I feel like this is a thing that has changed. I'm not saying it's for the better or for the or for worse. I'm just saying it's different because I don't remember this being a thing even a few years ago. You know, like iPhone 6S and 6S Plus era. Like even at that point, like going around and it's only in about the last year or so that I've noticed that this is a thing that happens a lot. And that's it. Like the last time I went to Disneyland, people were doing this. And the time before that, when I went to Disneyland a couple of years previous, it wasn't a thing that was happening in the park. And I have noticed a lot of people with their heads down in their phones at Disneyland. And that was the thing. That was when I started paying attention to it. And that was about a year and a half ago.
So one of the things I noticed is this is definitely not new. And we had some really interesting comments to my article. But, I said, look, we've all lived this through. People said kids were addicted to television, and that's the ruin of us. And then they were addicted to computers, and that's the ruin of us. And then they were addicted to the internet, and that's the ruin of us.
You didn't even go back to AM radios. That was a problem too in its day.
So one of the readers
I was destroyed by the cassette Walkman. My youth came to an end because of that. Thank you.
Hey, when Geoduck, by the way, who's an awesome reader at TMO and
Gooey Duck.
Thank you, Bryan.
I always thought it was Geoduck, but all right.
It's spelled Geoduck, but it's apparently the word is pronounced Gooey Duck. I did the same thing, and
Jeff they're delicious.
So Gooey Duck, who apparently also has done some camera work for one of our favorite shows, Curse of Oak Island. Anyway, he pointed out that this went back to the radio eras in the 1920s, that people worried about that rock and roll. People worried they were going to get addicted to that, although I'm not sure that was addiction as much as anything. But he went back all the way to Aristotle, who apparently said people shouldn't learn. What they were worried about was, let me just read it. The clincher was, I read back in college, Aristotle, if I remember correctly, once said that, in particular, the trend becoming fashionable would corrupt the youth. They would never bother to learn their lessons again. What was the innovation? Literacy. He opposed the idea of anyone other than learned men being taught to read. And I just, before the show, I went back and I wonder if he's confusing it with Socrates, because Socrates actually talked about things shouldn't be written down, but he wasn't worried about corruption of the youth, because interestingly enough, that's what he was put to death for. But he
different kind of corruption, brother.
Well, it's not in today's standard of corruption. His standard was, you argue too fucking good, so we have to kill you. Was basically the reasoning for him being put to death. But his notion was, it's kind of like having a painting. You can't interact with the painting. You can't ask it a question. It's not truth. It's just an image of it, and you can't, by not being able to ask a question or whatever, you never actually master the truth of something. Blah blah blah. Socrates philosophy shit. But the point is, I mean, that's how far back things go about, like, this is going to totally end things, and people just fucking ignore it because it's useful. That's the bottom line. This shit is useful. Television was useful. Yes, there's a lot of bad with it. And one other thing that you notice, anytime something is sort of new, people overindulge in it, and that's normal. You OD on it to figure out, what are the boundaries of this thing? What is it useful for? So, like, the worry about people being addicted to the internet. No one's addicted, really. I mean, I'm sure there's always some weird edge case on the bell curve, but nobody's really addicted to visiting web pages anymore, right? Like, that problem's solved. We figured out how to moderate dosage there. Social media is a bit newer, so people probably need to OD on that before they figure out what the right balance is. But this notion that somebody's got to tell you what it is, people will figure this shit out. And in the meantime, it's super useful. So I listed a bunch of other things that we're all totally addicted to, and yet somehow we're okay with. Mattresses.
Oh God, every night with that shit.
8 to 10, sometimes if things are going well, 14 fucking hours. Fuck the world. Fuck the community. I don't give a shit about what's going on in the universe. That's how fucking narcissistic mattresses make me. How do you like them apples? Chairs. Sit in this fucking chair like an addict. 8 hours. Easy. Toilets. How many hours do we collectively waste around the freaking toilet? So we're addicted. Clearly, you could go in the woods and get in touch with nature. Why don't we all do that? Because we'll all be better human beings. Just stop using your fucking plumbing. That would be awesome. Refrigerators. Fucking addictive motherfuckers. I sometimes hover around that refrigerator. I don't even know why. Just fucking open it and close it. I don't know why. I'm a fucking zombie with it. Just fucking those sons of bitches making refrigerators know that they're just fucking taking my attention doing this shit.
It's a plot with Big Grocery John.
Yeah. Sex. How much of our collective time is just fucking wasted thinking about how do I have some sex? Who do I have some sex with? How do I get more of this sex? What do I need to construct in my life to enhance my opportunities and chances to get more sex? It's ridiculous. It's just a compulsion that human being, and it's out there. And money, dirty, filthy money. We're always thinking like, I need to get more of it. Where do I get more of it? How do I get more of it? That's all I freaking do. People buying shit with credit cards. People addicted to this stuff. This whole buying and selling of shit. So it's just ludicrous. This stuff is useful. It doesn't mean it's addictive. And what's particularly disgusting about this bag of Muppets from this Stanford whatever.
John, I feel like you've been talking about Muppets.
I love Muppets.
Me
the
too.
Muppets are fucking awesome. Yeah, I'm kind of sad that. Anyway, I'm not going to go into, unless we really want to, into a side note on Muppets. But I'm a big fan of Muppets.
You know I want to.
I mean Muppet in the British sense. Yes. They have a really good. It's kind of almost
they do
a curse version of Muppet there, and I like it. Anyway, is that they're doing a disservice because there are technologies where people are scumbags and purposefully making them addictive. The gambling industry and several other industries with whom I've worked with in the past. I know this for a fact, but I also linked to an article in my article where they employ psychiatrists, psychologists, higher design to be as addictive as possible, to play to human frailties of hoarding and playing at the reward centers, of tuning the sounds just so, of playing positive sounds while you're losing to encourage you to play longer because of the positive sounds are addictive. There's a whole psycho field to this, and it's reported that several game makers have started using these kinds of professionals, and social media apps have employed this. So what it does is you're beating up on a good guy in this industry. Apple's putting out a fucking device that's awesome and has made us all gods. If I came back to 1990 and I said, you know what? I'm going to give you the power to know anything humanity has ever known, and the only thing you need to do is overcome your own fucking laziness to ask about it. If the ability to navigate anywhere, the ability to capture any moment in time and send it to anyone, even the entirety of the world, you would have said, you're retarded. This sounds like a bad new superhero from Marvel Comics that's just way too powerful because it makes fucking Superman look like a pussy. And
you'd have been branded a witch.
You'd been branded a witch. And it Jesus Christ, when you look back at the old Star Treks, you realize how little their thinking was compared to what the iPhone is. And it empowers this to everyone on the planet that wants it. That's what that device did. And it's an incredible device. To say I'm not going to use this or it's bad is to just be a lie. It's just stupid. Now, the apps that people actually are doing these bad things on totally do not get brought up in this topic. They've shifted the blame onto the good guy. That Apple makes a mode that to make the phone more repellent. You can put it in black and white mode. You can turn every notification off. They made a watch just so you don't have to use your phone as much if you don't want to. These guys are so goody two-shoes at times that it makes me want to vomit just because relatively I'm such a piece of scum next to them. So it's putting all the wrong energy and attention on the wrong entity. And these other assholes are going scot-free because nobody's talking about it.
Okay, so if you're done monologuing, I do have...
Said the guy that
say on that.
The article.
There is a...
No, Mr. Chaffin, I expect you to die. I mean, what?
There is a group very specifically aimed at the social media companies and the way they are deliberately making their services and their platforms as addictive as possible. So this is being talked about, despite the fact that very sadly, is targeting the platform maker instead of the actual.
I feel like that's a different issue.
But
because
press pick up on more.
I know.
Pick up on more.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because nobody's dragging Google for this. And why is that? Because when you bitch about Google, you don't get clicks like you do when you bitch about Apple. But I feel like the story is really wrong because honestly, like if you ask people what they're spending so much of their time with, it's probably, and I'm again guessing and I'm not trying to judge, it's probably not stuff that Apple shipped with the phone because nobody's holding that thing up to their heads and going, oh my God, homeroom. Did you see I'm in homeroom? Oh my God. Like nobody's making actual phone calls. People might be doing a lot of texting, but in real life, it's probably WhatsApp or Signal or something like that. And if they're using Facebook enough, they probably have the Facebook app or the Facebook Messenger app. So they're using stuff that isn't necessarily Apple at all. And that's the part that I think would be frustrating. And that's the part that I don't understand why this hasn't fizzled out is because people are focusing on the wrong thing. Because yes, there's a problem. And it's things like Facebook not being able to verify information or Twitter not being able to get rid of people who threaten my life or things like that. But there are other issues.
Those are separate issues too. The issue here is addictive platforms. And the social media companies are in this like zero-sum race to have 100% of our attention the whole day long.
All the time.
And they appear to feel like that they will fail unless they can get that. Mm-hmm. And that's a completely separate problem from the other issues that you were just launching into.
Right, but I feel like there's other things that people should be able to complain about. Like this, Apple's not the problem here.
That is a huge issue. That is a huge issue. Facebook is constructed to be addictive.
Yes.
Twitter, to a lesser extent, is. Facebook in particular annoys the crap out of me.
Well, yes, so and they want it to be, and they're not secret about it. They want you to be on Facebook as much as you possibly can. You gotta scroll. You know, that's part of why the algorithm changes all the time because, of course, you're gonna miss stuff.
The group that is complaining about this, it's made up of former Facebook, Google, and Apple employees. And they're called the Center for Humane Technology. They got a little bit of a splash in early February.
So it
has been like a month.
But my point is that this thing went big time because Apple was targeted by these tools. And it's a constant in tech, and it's a constant even in the wider press now that it's in a busy internet, yell Apple. And there's no merit to the vast majority of the stories. And what it does is it's actually harmful. Bryan and I, we may agree or disagree vehemently past one another on the extent of the Facebook addiction and stuff, but to the extent that that's a real legit organization, that organization has got a legit topic, and whether I agree or not with it, it's got very reasonable concepts and ideas to put forward to that no one's going to shine a light on. And bullshit like this just puts that further in the corner. It does more harm than good.
Because you're not advancing the conversation anymore.
Right. This is just screaming Apple in a crowd.
It's just hand waving. And you know, the thing that really frustrates me about this, because I started doing this a long time ago, and that is I've read a story, and whatever the sensational headline was or whatever, I've read it, And then mentally I've gone, okay, we're going to take Apple out of here and we're going to put Google, and every place that says iPhone, I'm going to put Pixel, and every place that says iOS, I'm going to say Android. And I'm going to read this and I'm going to see if people would wet their pants if this was the same story about a different mobile platform. And a lot of times, kids, write this down. You could do this at home. If you do this, a lot of times you won't get anywhere with that other story, whatever it is. So, Apple's addicting people. Okay, is it also Android? Because maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I think that that's a good yardstick to use to measure. And a lot of people aren't. And that's because Apple generates clicks. And you got to have clicks because otherwise you can't write the next story that's like actual journalism or not or whatever. Like, I know that sometimes you have to write, I don't remember who the actor was, but there was an actor that talked about how his whole career was one for you, one for me. Like, I'm going to do one to make people happy that gets me a big fat paycheck that maybe isn't my favorite thing so that I can afford to do the project for myself. And I feel like maybe that's what's happening here. I really want to think that maybe this is just like journalism people are doing to pay the rent so that they can go do the investigative story. And I want that to be true.
You know what?
I know it's not by the look on John's face.
No,
it's weirdly, I wish that was the case.
Weirdly, I would be okay with a one for you, one for me, one stupid story and the one reasonable story. But it reminds me of the old Bugs Bunny cartoons, which no one under only an ancient fart like me would remember. But he had this old way that when he was splitting money with someone, he'd say, one for you, one for me. 2 for you, 1, 2 for me. 3 for you, 1, 2, 3 for me, right? And that's the way it is today, right? It's far more noise than signal. It's the news has become.
Okay, wait, hold on.
Just let me finish this. The news is.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're not getting enough screen time. Go ahead.
That's right. The news has become Apple's algorithm of differential privacy, right? There's so much noise that it's impossible to find the signal anymore as part of the problem. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, my OCD was just going off the charts because it's 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 for you, 2 for me, 1 for you, 3 for me. That's how the Bugs Bunny thing went.
No, the Bugs Bunny thing went the way I went. I'll find the clip for you too. He actually counts it because I remember he would do 1, 2 for you, 1, 2 for me, 3 for you, 1, 2, 3 for me. But anyway, maybe I'm misremembering it. I'm old, so who knows? So I'm actually surprised. So even though we're all, and by all of us, I mean Bryan, cranky pants about this, we actually probably agreed more than we disagree, which I'm kind of surprised on this. Anyway, what I think is that the kids are all right. They're going to, it's just like what kids do with everything, by the way. Is there anything a kid does go beyond addiction when they're first taking it up? Whenever they get a new toy, they'll play with it like intensely. They figure out the boundaries of this shit, and they're like, okay, I don't need this anymore. And some things take more time than others to kind of explore those boundaries, but they'll all figure this out. The one thing, and by the way, this was tangentially touched upon you, Kelly, in your last podcast, which is, in the meantime, they could do themselves irreparable harm is the problem. Because I was telling this to Bryan last time. I can't believe this was sold to the public, but this is social media. It's like, hey, why don't you just talk? And not only just publicly talk in a way where any stupid shit you say is out there on the record forever and ever and ever. What a great deal. Because we know that I've never said anything fucking stupid in my life that I would ever regret. So I want everything I say permanently on the fucking record forever. In Europe, this is one of the few times where I'm actually cool with the European regulation, and there should be mechanisms. I'm surprised that Google hasn't, they've done the right thing in Europe, but not yet in the US. And I think one state in the US has passed.
They did the right thing because they were forced to.
Right. The eraser rule, which is kids should be able to wipe parts of their digital history where they did stupid shit of here's pics of me drunk and whatnot. Because, when we hire, we always do background checks. All kinds of crazy stuff comes out. It's so easy to ruin your life today over stupid stuff. We've hired people. Thankfully, they're smart enough. If you're ever interviewing and you got some baggage in, that is going to come out in a background check, here's a pro tip: bring it up right away. There was a kid that had on his, in his history that he was on the sexual offender list, and he's like, "Look, you're going to do this investigation. this is going to come up. Let me tell you what it is. I was drunk and I peed on the side of a building, and that's considered public indecent exposure, and you get labeled with that, which is horrible, which, by the way, is not helping any kids anywhere by having that kind of crazy history for kids. But nonetheless, bringing that up front. But it all comes out, is my point. Every stupid tweet, every stupid post, every drunken post, there should be some way for, and kids, and this is the great thing, is like, not only can you do this permanently on the record forever, hey kids, have at it. Because when you're 13, 14, 15, you totally understand the ramifications of what goes on with that. Yeah, every kid's a master of the consequences of that for a lifetime. Fantastic. So it'd be good. I'm all for like some tools like that. And I think you were mentioning something like that, Kelly, in the other podcast as well.
Yeah. That if you are in high school right now and you want to run for office in a little while, like, that's, if you have a Facebook account, that might be bad for you. Like, given the rule, well, you know, in the before times, what the rules were like for public conduct and what people could dig up about you, and look at this embarrassing YouTube thing and whatever, you know, and you know, like I said before, I don't have any of that because I wasn't on the internet when I was a kid, because it was rocks and sticks when I was a kid. So, you know, there wasn't any of that. And I feel like in a lot of cases you might be better off, but also, like, there needs to be, something's going to have to give, at least in the United States. And I don't know what that's going to be. And I don't know if it's that people are going to have to understand that, when you are a dumb teenager, you are a dumb in public teenager now. And that didn't used to be the case. And so you just have to accept that your dumb teenagerdom is recorded forever, or kids are going to have to get smarter, or laws are going to have to change to make it so that, like, you can go and scrub some of that and have it actually be purged.
All right. Before we move on, Rick puts it simply. He says he simply tells kids that nothing's ever going to go away.
So while I agree with Rick, I disagree with him that there's any chance that a 15-year-old has a concept of what the impact of that's going to be.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's got to be a mechanism. One mechanism is that I'm shocked that the market has not solved, is kind of what I've constructed with Bryan, you're a part of it, are just private social network groups, which, iMessage has quietly done, and nobody publishes anything about this, but it's a huge trend where I have a little tech group, I have a little politics group, I have a little car group and whatnot, and it's private, and everything that's said on there, you know, I mean, if someone's mean and hates your guts, I guess they come out, but the point is, it's generally kind of a private conversation, and there should be this concept of private social networks. And I'm someone smart's going to figure out how to make money at that. And
it's Slack
thing. Yeah, Slack does pretty well. Yeah, you're right.
Do you remember Eric Schmidt complaining because Google couldn't get to Facebook posts? Complaining about how basically anything walled off from the internet is bad.
Dude, that guy,
which is true for Google.
That guy is a creepy guy that stepped in the shit in his life, and talk about a star over his, fortunes, man. He is perfect example of, dude, anybody can make it. If that sack of humanity, can step in the shit, someday you can too. Just have a dream. Anyway, yeah, the hypocrisy, meter went far off the scope.
Yep. So what's the shenanigans stuff?
So I had a bunch of questions, and I'll start with an easy one, Kelly.
Okay.
Super easy one.
It stands for Twin Ion Engine. It's how the TIE Fighter is powered. It's an acronym. Oh, that wasn't it? Okay.
That wasn't it. By the way, I was talking a little bit, and I didn't realize that you were a big Star Wars fan, as am I, despite my constantly shitting on every Star Wars movie that comes out since the original 3. If you get a chance, there was the Clone Wars. It was a cartoon. It's on network, and it's okay. And towards the end of, I think it's 3 or 4 seasons, it gets really good. And then the Rebels that continues off of that
Star Wars Rebels is apparently super great and just ended, and I'm sad.
The most inspired Star Wars writing. I don't read the books, so maybe they're even more awesomer. But I just wonder why the people that do that are not the people that are writing the movies, because there is wonder. One of the things I remember, there was wonder every time I watched the Star Wars movie. There was, and it was a super story you told about, just the Princess Leia being, and I got to give you credit. You used the word broken in the coolest way. Like Steve Jobs when he talked about death being a good thing, and it was so non-banal, and it was true. And you use the word broken in the same way. And maybe you'll just share that story about Princess Leia.
Okay, well, so I was about 3.5. We just got my brother, and we went to the drive-in. We all headed off to the drive-in. My brother and I are both adopted, so there's no born in my family. Like, my brother and I aren't born. We were got. So we go off to the movies, and my brother's like brand new and cried through a lot of it, and so we didn't get to see how it turned out. And I don't remember this part, but both of my parents independently have backed each other up on this, that I spent the next week asking them what happened in the movie, because we had to leave in the middle and come home because my brother was fussy. So what happened? Who was that? What was that? Like, what's with the bad guy? I don't know what happened. And I wanted to know the rest of the story, and they didn't see the movie themselves, so they didn't know what to tell me. So eventually my mom sent my dad and I off to the drive-in so I could find out how this ended, because apparently at 3.5, I had already started to master the art of pestering somebody into telling me the thing I want to know. So we went to the movies, and it was the best thing that I had ever seen in my entire 3.5 years of life on the planet. And the thing that stuck with me, my takeaway from that at 3.5, I don't know what my dad took away from it as a film, because my dad's not a big sci-fi guy, but he's a big Western guy, so he might have been into it at least a little bit on the good guy, bad guy kind of thing. But for me, it was Princess Leia did all the running the boys were doing. She did all the shooting the boys were doing. She saved the day herself one time. And I basically spent the rest of my life comparing everybody else to Princess Leia. Well, why is that girl just sitting there waiting to be rescued? Like, Princess Leia wouldn't sit there and wait. She would have had her own way to get out. She didn't cry and be all afraid in front of the bad guys.
She did need a little help getting out of the cell. Just saying.
She did, but she wasn't scared. When they brought her in, and like, they blew up her whole house. I remember my dad telling me this story, that I was so sad that Princess Leia didn't have a house anymore because the bad guys blew it up. And that was very sad to me. Like, what happened to her stuff? Like, where's her teddy bear? I was very concerned about this as a child. And so I remember like really being worried about it. But mostly what I remembered is that Princess Leia did all the stuff the boys were doing. And why can't that girl on TV do all the stuff the boys are doing? Why does that girl on TV seem so afraid? Like, Princess Leia wouldn't have been afraid of that. And so when I wanted to go play T-ball as like a second grader, everybody was like, why do you want to do that? And I'm like, well, why can't I do that? Like, tell me why not? Like, if Princess Leia wanted to play T-ball, Princess Leia would play T-ball. Like, I didn't say that to a lot of people, but that was always what was in my head. Like, Princess Leia would have done it, and Princess Leia would have kicked a bunch of ass. So I want to do that. And so that was always sort of my measure. Like, if Princess Leia could do all of the same stuff the boys were doing, why can't I do all the same stuff the boys are doing? So I read comic books, and I watched more Star Wars movies, and I read a lot of Star Wars books, and I played T-ball, and I played soccer. And I did all of this because Princess Leia was like fundamental to my worldview. And part of the reason that happened is because George Lucas didn't know any better. He didn't know how to write her as a girl who was some dainty princess in a tower who sat around patiently waiting to be rescued. That wasn't who she was. He just knew how to write people. And so she gave as good as she got, like, the whole time, because it didn't occur to him, oh, I have to do something special with this girl because she's a girl. That's not how it worked. And in fact, right now you can see a little bit of it. I'm wearing a Star Wars t-shirt right now. It says "Fight the Empire." It's new era, so it probably makes John mad, but it's a Star Wars t-shirt, and that was even before Bryan said, hey, do you want to come on the show today? That just happened. So, like, as a child, when I grew up, I wanted to be Princess Leia. Now that I'm an adult, I want to be Carrie Fisher. now that I'm older and can appreciate with some perspective. And because, like, she did what she wanted, and she gave no fucks, and it really didn't matter to her if you liked what she was doing or didn't like what she was doing. She was going to do that if that was the thing that she felt she needed to do. And on top of being like tremendously clever and very, very funny and like the most amazing script doctor of like all of them, she was an amazing person in her own right. I was a disaster when she passed away. I was a complete mess. And
Imagine.
but that was like, for me, that's a thing that was always near and dear to me. And part of that is because George Lucas wasn't great at writing female characters. He just wrote her like he wrote everybody else, kind of a swashbuckler, maybe a good line here and there. And this is what she's going to do, because she has to do her part, because she's leading a bunch of people who all believe in this one thing, which is that the organization that is in power is wrong. And I need to do what I can do to make the world right. And she's standing up and fucking doing it. And like, there's not a lot of examples like that in the world. Like from where I'm sitting, like on TV and in movies and stuff, there wasn't a lot of that. So to me, that was a very, very fundamental piece of who I am and why I'm here and why the only girl is a thing that I'm used to, but don't necessarily like. And that's why I put my efforts into trying to make that better for other people.
And it's, I like the way that you worded it on that show. You said it broke me. But it's not broke in the way that you normally use it. Like it broke, I don't know, I guess the old you and created the new you. And I like that concept that when something breaks you, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You didn't die from that if it was a hardship, but in this particular case, it was nothing. It was not a hardship. It was just enlightenment. And it gave you a whole new you. Jenny said that description of Carrie Fisher sounds a bit like John, and I'm telling you, I rock the hell out of that gold bikini. So,
I have no doubt.
Not that is something that shouldn't even be thought of.
It is what he wore to the store earlier.
Anyway, all right. So here's the easy question I have for you, Kelly. What do you think of Tim Cook?
That's not an easy question, because I have a lot of opinions about him. I think sometimes his focus might slip, but I have faith in him as a leader, and I have faith in him as a person who worked with Tim Cook, who worked with Steve for a long time before Steve passed. Like, one of the things I don't think Steve Jobs ever got enough credit for was surrounding himself with a lot of very smart and very talented and very capable people.
That was maybe his greatest skill.
Yes. And, he was a showman. We knew that, and he could be a businessman because he saw opportunities where sometimes people didn't. And that was also a thing that he was good at. But I think the thing that he was best at was seeing something in somebody and putting them in a place where the whole was greater than the sum of their parts. So that's what I think. And like, am I frustrated with him sometimes? Yes. Do I cheer him sometimes when he does something that I really like? Yes. But do I think Apple is doomed? And no. Has Apple been the same since Steve died? No. For good or ill, it's going to be different because there is no Steve. If you have toast and then you don't have butter anymore and you have to eat dry toast. Yes, dry toast is different. Like, I don't understand all the people, like what people mean, but generally will not admit to, is Apple was better before Steve died because they were doing what I wanted them to do or whatever. And that's not necessarily, that wouldn't have necessarily even served the company well in their current iteration, I don't think. Apple would have had to evolve one way or another, whether it was under Steve or under someone else. And I feel like, sure, there was adjustment, and I feel like sometimes Tim doesn't do what I want him to do, but I felt the same way about Steve, that he wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. And, he doesn't have to do what I want. Like, I'm just some schmuck with an opinion. Like, I'm not a bunch of people, and I don't have anything to back any of this up. And again, edge case, like, I'm a person who cares deeply about the Apple TV, and I really wanted it to be something awesome for home automation and that, all. And, I never wanted the phone to get any bigger than I could swipe it with my thumb, and it totally did. And, I don't want Mac OS to continue to be Fisher priced, but On the other hand, all of the people in my family who call me for tech support about stuff are probably pretty happy about that because it means they can't inadvertently do something and screw up their computer. So I understand, but I think the bigger issue is that there are a lot of people who don't understand that not for me is not the same as not for anyone.
Yeah.
And those are the people who have the most opinions and the loudest opinions.
That I agree with. I disagree with your who am I to judge? As I've noted, you're. Anytime I hear a statement of that, I'm like, I guarantee you're more qualified than any of the 12 random idiots that aren't smart enough to figure out how to get out of jury duty.
I think we talked about this earlier.
Who can judge you to death?
This is true.
You're at least as that. Qualified as that to be judgmental about it. You may not be privy to the information to help your judgment be as accurate as people on the inside, but that's a different story.
Right.
So, what's interesting, part of what you said was, he may not be picking up on as many opportunities. And I think Steve Jobs, my mom had so much awesome wisdom in her life that she described people in three ways under two. This was her thing. John, there's three types of people. Smart people learn from other people's mistakes. Normal people learn from their mistakes. Stupid people never learn. And you can't be smart all the time, but hopefully at least some of the time to learn to avoid some of the bumps in life. And in my time, I've learned there's also another three type of people, and it deals with opportunity. There's some people that can see opportunity. Some people just can't. There's a subgroup of the people that can see opportunity and do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a further subgroup of the people that do something about it that can make something of it, right? And
yeah.
you get more and more refined as you go down. Steve Jobs was a person that saw opportunity everywhere. And one of the things, it's the most excellent interview. The guys at the menu bar deserve kudos for the best Apple employee interview I've heard in probably at least 10 years. It might be so good that it might, and by the way, I have to thank one of our readers, Grant, for bringing it to my attention. It might be the best Apple interview I've heard since Steve Jobs' interviews, right? So it was that good. And he pointed out a lot of things that we knew about Jobs, but one thing we didn't was that Steve Jobs constantly was saving engineering time. One, that he would listen to engineering, which apparently Tim Cook is not doing. It's coming up from on high because Johnny said so. Let me be really clear. Johnny doesn't know fucking shit about software user interfaces. What he knows about fucking software user interfaces is what a fucking bull knows to do in a China shop. He's horrible at it. He's awesome about design in many other areas. And in aesthetic beauty, mwah, that's fantastic. But it also has to work. And he doesn't know shit. And coming up on high, what's amazing is as much of a totalitarian dictator people perceive Jobs was, he actually took feedback, and there was this feedback loop with him. And engineers could get access to that and bring things to his attention, and he would react intelligently to it. And they give him a lot of credit for making great decisions. And this was an interview, by the way, with Bob Burrow, who worked, he was on basically on the iPhone team from 2007 to 2014. And the other thing that Bob mentioned, though, was that is not known was there are many times that inside the scuttlebutt of Apple, and I've had a lot of friends that worked at Apple, and I myself have worked at Next, which is
Apple adjacent.
Yeah, I'll put it as a concentrated form thereof, and it's true. He had focus, and he was able to give focus to the subgroups under him in engineering, and that meant cutting years of development time off in some cases on bullshit tangents that, because Apple runs like fiefdoms. It's a bunch of headless cats not knowing what the fuck to do, trying to grab some power and money and resources until some light gets shown on them from the demigods up on high. And they do a lot of stupid things. And Steve Jobs had a way of crystallizing it, and he made huge efficiency gains. So you have to listen to this interview with Bob, and there's a section of it where he goes in and he just saved time and time again. And it goes to my thesis that this is all bullshit that Bryan kind of brings up all the time. Is like, the scale is so great, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. It is bigger, but I say in 2010 the scale was pretty good already, and yet under Steve they updated iWorks, they updated iLife, they updated every Mac every fucking year, they updated the iPhone that year, made a whole new app store. Also, by the hell, what the fuck, we just released an iPad, and updated every product, all with 1/4 the human power they have now, and 1/4 of what they're actually, I think it's 1/8 of what they're spending on R&D currently. So I think Tim's failings is he's a bad manager relative to Steve Jobs. It's kind of like saying, and there's fucking, oxygen is needed for human life. Okay, but he's failing in an area that he's supposedly supposed to be good at, which is operations. I get that he's not coming up with the new iPad or whatever as frequently maybe as under Jobs. That I understand. But he's supposed to be keeping the trains running. He's supposed to figure out organizational flow and make it more efficient. And the fact that he's not capable of doing that, and the fact that there's a feedback loop that is now broken to a guy that clearly needs it, to me says he sucks.
So here's the thing about my take on that is that the thing that I remember having heard about Tim Cook, which I admit was not much, and I was never a person to go like scrape up all the data on all the people who were also on the leadership page who were not Steve. But the limited amount of information that I had about Tim Cook beforehand was that basically supply chain was his jam. And I can talk to you about supply chain way more than anybody wants to hear about supply chain, because my husband used to work for a company that taught it and described it to people and taught classes and wrote books and all this kind of stuff. So I can tell you quite a bit more about it than like I said, than anybody really wants to hear. But things like just in time and price negotiation and making sure that you have like honest to God legit shipping lanes and what the turnaround time is on making that stuff, and how you can be so well tuned that you can just turn this one up for a little while till you get what you need, and then you can turn it back down, and then you turn this one up, and like that was where he shone like so much. And that was his thing, was like negotiating those deals and getting nuts and bolts together and making that stuff happen. And all of that was great. Yeah. Bryan got bored. He's on his phone now.
Yeah.
But
he's sulking because both of us are so right.
I don't know that it's so much that operations are what he's good at and failing at right now, as much as it is a piece of operations. Yes, it's the trains running, but I don't think that the nuts and bolts of the day-to-day is what he gets to have a hand in as much from his new seat as he did from his old seat. Because when he was interim, he was only doing like part of the CEO stuff, because a lot of it could still go to Steve or could go to other people. And so when he was interim CEO, he was still doing his job, but kind of stepping in on this other side. And I agree with you that I don't think Johnny being in charge of as much as Johnny is in charge of. Let me try that again. I don't think Johnny being as in charge as he is, that one I can say, is good for the company. I don't think the conversation people are having about Tim Cook is the conversation people need to have. I think it needs to be a conversation about Johnny and about what his vision is, because like you said, the part that Johnny can do himself and that he has the talent in is amazing, but you can't. It's a very square peg round hole thing, because I feel like we've had huge software bugs that got out the door, even with public betas that should not have existed. And there's, I personally am affected by this because I don't install anything the day it comes out. I used to wait about 24 hours and make sure it wasn't like bricking computers across the world. And now I wait a few more days because it's never the first 24 hours where somebody finds out. Did you know that you can log into somebody else's computer without their admin password if you just hit return enough times and they have High Sierra? Isn't that great? No, sweetie, no. So that's the thing that I think like is a problem. And I've had to like ratchet that back because in the old days, it used to be a couple of weeks when there was no social media and you just sort of had to hear from your Mac friends. Like, I installed this thing on my PowerBook 1400 and everything is fine. So now you can install it too. And, you know, there didn't used to be a fundamental flaw like what we've seen lately. And I would like to know, and I know we never will, but I would like to know how that stuff is getting out the door and what has changed because we didn't used to have stuff like that.
Yeah,
what has changed in the meantime besides the number of people involved in the process that made that possible?
You've got to listen to that podcast because part of it is this broken feedback loop. I
only got to listen to the first bit. I haven't got a chance to finish it. I too love the menu bar. I was so excited when Zach had me on. So,
well, they were lucky to have you, but nonetheless, and what I'll give them really good credit for is they have such a great conversational style in just having open-ended dialogues. Really good podcast. Highly recommend. I'll link to it. Anyway. But I'm going to continue to disagree with you on Tim Cook in this regard, in why he still sucks. Is I agree with you on the operational side. It is an achievement that unfortunately I don't have the right words to give him enough credit for to make those trains run well at these scales is tough. And Rick Allen says, but there weren't as many delays back then. But even with the delays that the press goes nuts about, they're nothing delays compared to the whatever. No. They're more noise than anything.
And nobody remembers the stuff that happened under Steve. This is one of those things where nobody remembers how many years it was between releases of OS 10. Nobody remembers that not only did you wait 2.5, 3 years, but you then paid over $100 for the privilege of the new one, because the pinstripes are a slightly shinier gray now. No. Like, nobody remembers what that stuff was like. Nobody remembers, like, oh, do you know why, the brutal public beta period of OS 10 there in, 2001. Nobody remembers any of the other stuff that went along with a lot of the shenanigans. Like, there were delays in stuff, like, off the top of my head, I'm not going to remember which one, but one of the Power Mac towers had at least one unexpected delay, and I want to say that there were two that we just sort of got the rumblings of back when everything was still super secret, and the only way you knew anybody was right about their rumor was when they got a takedown order from Apple. And there were 2 delays, and it made that computer more than a year later than it was supposed to be when it finally came out.
A totally fair assessment, but I'll tell you that there's so many things that wouldn't happen with Steve Jobs, and I'm not even
right.
I won't go into the ones that are more kind of that requires vision and taste and things like that. Like, there's no way Steve Jobs would let the Apple TV have the shortcoming it is today. Like, hey, here are the 80,000 apps that are related to the channels on your cable company that are in this subsection of a subsection of another app, and that you manually have to add like an animal clicking. He would have fucking killed everyone involved with that. But I'm talking.
Oh my God, he would have dropped it in a fish tank. Have you heard the iPod story?
No.
There's an iPod story about how the engineering team brought one into Steve and said, here's what we think the iPod should be. And he said, make it smaller. And they said, we can't. There's no way to make it smaller. And he took it over to the fish tank and he dropped it in and bubbles came out of it. And he said, do you see those bubbles? And they all said, yes. And he said, that was air in the device. Make it smaller. And that's the kind of stuff I think of now. Like, Tim's not going to do that. Tim's a Southern gentleman. That's not going to happen. But I'm not saying you're wrong. I might disagree with you, but I don't think that you are coming from a place of incorrectness.
Let me give you a really high level thing that would not happen with Steve Jobs that does relate to operations. That Apple is completely dependent upon China. Forget the 20% that they come to the bottom line for sales. Who gives a shit? Apple can whisk that off like
it's a rounding error.
Not even a fucking cold. So selling there, who gives a shit?
Right.
That everything they make comes from China. And if China decides, fuck Apple, Apple is fucked in a way that's so profound that there are generations and generations of their children at Apple that will still be fucked because of how fucked they are.
And that is literally the one organization that has that kind of power. Samsung doesn't have that power. Qualcomm doesn't have that power. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, none of them have that power. Nobody but China has the power to do this to Apple. I agree with you 100%.
Steve Jobs lies all the time. Like when he went to Obama and said, manufacturing's never coming back because it didn't suit him. It's the exact same version of, why would you want to have an iPod that plays videos, right? It's just today that suited him. So that was the bullshit narrative. But let me assure you.
Who needs a stylus?
let me
have 10.
Yeah, let me assure you, he would have had a plan B of alternate manufacturing areas, not in the US in a completely automated way. And I mean, the next machine was basically fully automated back in the day, clearly not as small as the iPhone today, but it would be done. Let me put it this way, if some dude at Foxconn has already made version 2 of the iPhone assembly unit that's completely automated, and he fired 50,000 people in China because apparently they're too expensive to maintain in China. Steve Jobs would have had it here. There's no doubt. And that he hasn't been strategic at a really fundamental level about procurement.
Which is a failing under his purview. I agree with you on that. Because that used to be his jam.
And I think this is the place that if you're into Apple and you're not into Apple because you're a fanboy, it happens to be a place where magic has happened several times. Like when I describe the iPhone as this thing that gives you superpowers greater than a god what would have been greater than a god in 1990. Just think how profound that is. And it's
in 2000. You don't even have to go back to 1990. You just have to go back to the beginning of the century we're in. And if you told people, yeah, you know that company that makes the gumdrops that they call computers? Yeah, the company that makes that and the Hello Kitty purse laptop, because that's how everybody described it to me as soon as it came out. The company that makes those is going to take over your world. Yeah, but I'm a Windows user. It matters not. Yeah, but I have a BlackBerry. It matters not. Here's what you need to know. That company is going to take over. Do you have any idea how crazy town you would have been at that moment? And here's how I know. Because when Steve Jobs came back, my stepdad had asked me something about tech stocks because he was just getting set up with investment. He was having to do it on his own. It was a whole thing. And he asked me, what do you think about tech companies? And I told him a few different, like, here's what you need to know about this company. Here's what you need to know about that company. Here's what you need to know about Apple Computer. Steve Jobs has just come back. There's rumors that he's got a whole new computer coming. It's going to blow people away. I know Apple's at $11 a share now. But if you buy some and you have some faith, I really think that having the guy who built the company come back to the company is going to make a huge difference in how all of this works and what they're going to do. And I know that you think I'm saying that because I love their stuff, but I'm not saying that because I love their stuff. And I made this like impassioned couple of paragraph plea about like, here are all the things that are going to be great about Apple. And if you buy some now, you will not be sorry.
So
he didn't do it. And to this day,
I did.
Like 20 years later or something, every once in a while it comes up when he's like, we'd whatever it is, we'd have bought the car with the better, with the better trim package if I'd have had that Apple stock you told me about or whatever, every once in a while it's like this joke now because I'm like, I told you at 11 that you needed it and you didn't listen and that's on you, So I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you that where he's coming from now on that stuff is incorrect and it should be better.
Well,
absolutely.
And here's the rock and the hard place for the Apple, for people that are into the company and its leader. I think he sucks, but unfortunately he's the best we got. Right, because the alternatives, none of them are ripe. Bryan and I apologize. I think Bryan has having technical difficulties, so it's apparently the Kelly and John show for a while. We discussed, who we thought were good alternatives, at least that were in kind of our consciousness. Then I kind of like asshole Scott Forstall because I think this company could use an asshole. Or my dream is Elon Musk, but he'll never do it. But realistically, out of the characters there that are in the mix, for me, it's Craig Craig Federici or Federici or however you pronounce it would probably
You pronounce it Air Force One.
Air Force One. Right. But I don't know that that's a better alternative is my point. And so he may just be the best we have for now, but that doesn't.
It's an alternative. Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't make the fact that there are no better alternatives doesn't mean his leadership is good.
There is no Pepsi challenge at this moment.
Yeah.
To be sure. It's not like you can just go, well, if it was Tim or it was this guy, it wouldn't matter because we'd be getting the same stuff or whatever. But here's another thing that I think a lot of people don't talk about. And this is one that really chaps me when people want to really throw down about it. And that is this. I have to lean back a little bit because I tend to wave my hands a lot when I get going. So
I'm very over it.
So,
I can't stay near a microphone. I don't know how you do it.
I know. Well, I'm envious of yours, and that's why. Because I'm like, I'm gonna keep hitting this one. So here's the thing that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about is that they're going, if we don't get a new phone that just blows the doors off technology every year, it's because Apple is doomed and nobody there can innovate. But nobody is taking into account what I call microwave syndrome. Like when for people who remember the olden days before microwaves were commonplace, nobody had a microwave. Everybody that wanted to reheat something had to get a pan and put it on a burner on the stove or put it in the oven like a caveman. And it was terrible and everything took longer, I assure you. But then people got microwaves, and the microwave was like this magical wonder box in the kitchen. And it was amazing. And all that stuff that you used to have to do, like you can just put a plate in the microwave and like a minute later it can come out with hot food on it. And that's amazing. And it changed the world. Think for a minute about your microwave being a magical device that was a revolution in your kitchen. No, you can't. You know why? Not a thing. It does what it does. It's done. Like we've had all the microwave technology we're ever going to have, and that's what it is. And it's not special anymore. It's not magical to people today who are like, I go to 7-Eleven and I get a burrito and 90 seconds later it's hot. The end. Like nobody thinks about it that way. It's just utilitarian. And that's what happened to computers. At first, they were a giant thing in a university, and then they became a giant thing in your house, and then they became a small thing in your house. And once they were a small thing in your house, lots of people quit caring. Like you have one, you paid a couple $100 for it. You upgrade the graphics card every so often so that you can continue to play Warcraft or whatever it is people do with other computers. I don't know. And that's it. It's not special. It's not interesting. But there was a point when, oh my God, did you know it could do this? Oh my God, did you know it could do this? Oh my God, did you know it could do this? And then it got less exciting and they got less revolutionary and they got less magical. And all of the magic of the computer itself as a thing in your house and like, oh, I need a new one so I can do this other revolutionary thing that I could never do in my house before went away. And phones are doing the same thing. Tablets are doing the same thing. Mobile computing as a whole is doing the same thing because we had to start by getting them that did the same stuff as dumb phones. You know, I can do all of this texting, but I don't have to push number keys for 100,000 years in order to tell somebody I'm on my way home, right? Then they got voice dictation, which was super amazing, and like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there comes a point when that platform has matured and it's not going to be super interesting. And there's not going to be a new, oh, I have to upgrade my phone every single year because somebody's going to do something super duper amazing. Not everything is that way anymore when it comes to mobile computing, regardless of the platform that you're using. Android does not cause a revolution every time there is a new dessert out of Google. And there comes a point when it's not going to be the most exciting thing anymore. And I think people are trying to pin that on Tim Cook in a way that is not fair to him because it has nothing to do with who's in charge at Apple. It has to do with the maturity of the platform and the dissipation of the magic of the new ever smaller computer that you keep in your pocket. I mean, you know, if you really want to, when you go back and think about like the original iPhone, remember in 2007, when that first one was released, everybody who looked at it went, obviously Apple is doomed. You know why? Nobody's ever going to carry a phone that big. Think about that for a minute.
Yeah, I agree with the overall thrust of what you said, and it kind of jibes to industries doing what kids do, right? You're exploring the boundaries, you're building this out, you make some missteps here and there, and eventually you come to understand here is the thing. Yeah. And this is a microwave, this is what a phone is. That said, I think we are literally at the beginning of a new thing that's coming out. I could feel it in the ether, just like, before the iPhone came out. I remember I had these arguments, and of course everyone always argues with me because, one, if I say the sky is blue, there is a line forming out. Tell me it's not fucking blue because of me. But beyond that, the convergence thing, I don't know if you remember, all the tech press was like, there's never going to be convergence. Every device wants to be itself. Why would you want to have an MP3 player that's an MP3 player and a phone that's a phone? It's just stupid. No, the point was that no one figured out the right recipe, and you could feel it was coming. And
that was always my complaint, because people were like, nobody wants that. And I'm like, no, I absolutely want that. It's just that right now there's not a good one.
Right. And it's kind of, and this is, and it's a bit of what, unfortunately for Microsoft, and I give them credit for trying, they could never quite get that recipe right with tablet computing. And they're close, by the way, with regard to the Surface Studio. There's a lot right that they have in hardware. The software is a shit show. I'd rather fucking just stick forks in my face all fucking day and use the shit software. But I give them credit that they're trying. But they failed with the tablet, never getting that recipe to be correct. Apple figured it out, and it was the same thing.
But I always wanted Microsoft to try. Like, that's the other thing, is I liked that Microsoft was taking a crack at it. I never liked the outcome of most of it. Okay, no, that's not true. I liked Windows 7 because I felt like it was solid, and I felt like it was useful, and I felt like it did some interesting stuff. None of the mobile stuff ever worked for me. I tried. I did try. I took a shot at it, and it never interested me. But I wanted it to be good. I wanted it to be great. Just like I want Android to be great and refined and polished and beautiful, because I want Apple to have actual competition. I don't want Apple to sit around and be like, you know what would be great? I want them to have to fucking compete, because that is going to be the most interesting phase of Apple, when they actually have competition.
I agree. And I mean, I have a Surface book. Unfortunately, right now I'm using it as a holder for my laptop. But I give them a lot of credit. I love the new CEO. I think that the new CEO is doing a lot right in kind of actually advancing things. I don't like their current software, but whatever. The point being, though, that we're on the cusp of something that's going to happen with AI. I don't know if it's going to be when I say AI, I mean true AI. This whole people have conflated, and I don't mind that average people have, that the fact that the fucking tech press disingenuously conflates machine learning bullshit, which is useful but completely different from AI. AI says, what do I feel like learning and doing today? Right? Maybe I'll paint an elephant. Machine learning says, I'm going to watch 8,000 hours of fucking road and figure out the best fucking way to go on this road. And that's all I fucking know. That's all I ever want to fucking know. And I'm never going to think about, roses. That's what machine learning is. It's just, it's a big if-then statement that's generated by a computer, basically, instead of you coding it.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm chuckling to myself because as soon as we're done, I'm going to go record my Westworld podcast. So yes, let's sit here and talk about AI.
So the only thing that I've seen close to AI being real is that I respect Elon Musk, and it sounds like he has something in his lab that is probably approaching it. None of us have seen anything even close to real AI. But even machine learning has, if we don't even get AI for another 30 years, like they've been planning, promising us for the last 50 years, it's coming any day.
I was going to say, it's always 20 or 30 years away in real life.
Even the explosion of machine learning stuff is valuable, and it's transformative. It's going to kill like all the drivers when the level 4 and level 5 autonomous cars come out, and they're probably within 5 years, I would think, of getting that.
And that's going to bum me out because I get my best ideas while I'm driving.
Well, the ban on you driving, I don't think is going to come for another 20 or so years.
Good, because I like driving. Well, I grew up in the wilderness. I spent like most of my childhood in the car because we were far from everything. So
I love driving too. I
really do.
Them thing for me. Do you by chance have a manual? Do you row your own, or just?
I used to until very recently. But yeah, I like it, and we have a car that, well, actually, both cars will. You can put them in manual mode, and they have the paddles behind the steering wheel.
Yeah, that's what around too.
I like to do that in the Audi.
Nice. But anyway,
you can tell. Look at the look on my face when I'm like, oh, the Audi.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're saying anymore. I'm thinking about putting the Audi in sport mode.
The Audi. Yeah, very nice. There's something very zen about driving, especially when you get some road to yourself for a little bit. It's a very magical thing. You know what? Actually, I told this to Bryan a few times. I'm like, there's only a few parts of reality that I will consider genuinely to be magic, where as much analytics as I put to it, there's still something that transforms, that brings it above what it should be. Music is one of those. There's just, that is a total, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It is beyond understanding for me how just bloop, bloop, bloop notes can convey emotion and transport you to these magical places. It's a very trippy thing, that weird thing we have with our heads. The second one, I always said, for some reason, when I walk out of a movie at the end, when the lights are out and I was in a magic place and it was a particularly good movie, as I'm going through the corridor back to reality, I just feel like I am literally leaving one world to another. And there's just something magic about that feeling every time I go through it. Like I go. Mm-hmm. But the third is driving. It's not as good as the other two for me, but there is something when you're out there like that, and it's just a very zen thing. You're just going through the roads, your brain's another thing, and somehow I arrive places. I don't know how the hell I got there. And yet my body was able to do that while my brain was doing other things. It's really cool.
Yes. I love mileage. I really, really do.
Anyway, so I had another question for you.
Yes.
Why the fuck
oh no.
still call the iTunes store the iTunes store?
Oh my God, why are you asking me this? I don't call it the iTunes store. You know I don't call it the iTunes store. I call it the Burrow. The Weasley's house that got bolted on and bolted on and bolted on and bolted on and bolted on. Well, that's what we're dealing with iTunes right now.
You're talking about iTunes, the app, which I don't know who can pile more shit on them. I suspect I can more, which is a different story. No, but I mean the iTunes store where you buy apps or music or videos or whatever, right? I guess apps are no longer through there. So music and TV and movies and
buying
a movie. I think they should call it the media shop or something like that.
If nothing else, like just add a word, the iTunes media store. Like if you're so married to that name, like, oh my God, it makes me so angry. I keep saying on Mac Observer Daily Observations, I keep saying, like, my fondest wish is an Apple event where Tim Cook comes out on stage with a stack of paper and says, this is iTunes source code, and feeds it to a wood chipper. And then says, here's what we're doing on the Mac now. We're going to take one idea we had for iOS and bring it to Mac OS that none of y'all are going to bitch about. Here's what it is. You have a store for music. It's a separate thing. You have a thing on your computer to manage backups, transfers of photos, and app management on your device. So if you want to plug your phone into your computer, that's this other thing. The way they do now with image capture, where you don't have to do it in iTunes if you don't want to. Image capture is an app on your computer. If you plug in your phone, it goes, hi, I found a camera. Do you want to import all these pictures? And you can put them wherever you want. And if you're allergic to photos or iPhoto or whatever the hell they're doing to it now, you don't have to use it. You can just put them in a folder and you can organize that folder with Lightroom or AC/DC, I think, does it, or Extensys Portfolio or whatever the hell it is you want to use. You can use that on that folder and everything's fine. And we need it to be the video, like videos or whatever, that's TV and movies. We need that as a separate app, music as a separate place, and then iPhone management, device management as a separate thing. It needs to be broken out into all of those things. And I don't know why they're not. And it angers me they aren't. And it's stupid that they don't, because they just keep bolting on to a thing that was already held together by bubblegum and baling wire.
So I can't agree with you more. And by the way, this is when I first fell in love with you, Kelly. Where I wrote an article.
I don't have strong feelings about this at all. I wrote an article called iTunes Needs to Break Up with Itself.
I wrote the same article a year later and had no idea that you'd written yours, right? and we came out not too far apart. Basically, it needs to be broken up. How you slice it, is up for debate. And then after I put out my article, someone pointed out, like, idiot, like this was already done, and I read yours. And then I went to Bryan. I'm like, Bryan, why the fuck did you let me do this thing? Kelly already did this, And he's like, well, it's good to bring it up again. But so you were a year ahead of me on the breakup, and I totally agree with you that it needs to be broken up in some sane way. And the one thing that made me, it's not the one thing. There are many things that make me want to punch Tim Cook straight in the face really hard. But when he does the whole toaster fridge thing, like, it's a toaster fridge.
Oh my God.
I'm like,
you're doing that now.
Dude, I need to fucking use my phone on my Mac connected to iTunes to manage what photo album goes on my phone. And you have the fucking balls to even conjure the image of a toaster fridge. Dude, that's a fucking toaster fridge hooked up to my toilet, hooked up to the fucking microwave, hooked up to, I don't know, to the fucking HVAC thermostat.
Yes.
It's what that is at this point.
Yes. And yet the dryer is what's sending you notifications that nothing works.
It's crazy. And it goes to my overall theme. You and I came to the same conclusion. In not only does it need a breakup, but part of the breakup of what it needs is Apple needs, and I heard this part of your podcast, that you are also a designated IT for all of humanity because you're capable. And I think a lot of people in their family and circle get that designation. Some like it and some don't. But they need an app that can help you manage all of your devices. And they kind of had the initial stirrings of that in the airport utility app, in that if you ever see it and you have multiple airports, it kind of makes a graph for you. And you realize, why don't they just do that with all the devices? Why can't I see all my freaking iPhones and iPads and with a wand select all these and say, right? Of course, my aunt isn't going to do the update. I'm just going to do that, right? And I can administer all this, and I can make sure that they have the same thing. And this drives me nuts. To talk about, like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ. There's
take a breath, John. It'll be okay. I'm here for you. I agree with you on this. It's so aggravating. And part of the reason it's aggravating for me personally is because I have to say it out loud to other people. So I have to tell that family member, like, no, you plug your iPhone into iTunes because that's how you get a backup of it. If you don't want iCloud to gnaw on your Wi-Fi the entire time you're trying to restore all your backups. So I'm really excited you're getting a new phone, but make sure you plug the one you have into your goddamn computer for a minute before you leave to go down there and get a new phone, because it's important. It matters. And when you say this stuff out loud to people, it's ridiculous. And you wonder how many people who have Apple badges who walk into one of those buildings every day actually do this for other people, actually live life with the stuff that they go design or test or work on or whatever that they're doing with it. Because you say these things out loud to people and you feel like an idiot. And it's exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I don't blame the average human being. Like, here's a simple example. Why would a mere mortal, why would my grandma or my aunt need to know? Yeah, by the way, you want to do your backup not through the air. You actually want to do it on your computer, and you want to encrypt the backup. Why? Because you clearly have long ago forgotten every fucking password you've ever entered. I know you believe that through the power of the Force, I can pull that fucking password out of fucking nowhere, but I can't. And if you back up the encrypted version, it will remember your passwords. And
it saves all that for you. Yeah.
Why would a normal human being need to do this? They shouldn't. And there's a lot of just bad design. It's a whole other topic for probably a million other shows on their bad design choices there. But the point is, if you do have someone that knows and could at least manage those things for everybody, it would be great. And there's you wonder, like, do these assholes go home and what, they don't have to deal with their own family, right? Like, they don't say, like, I'm fucking tired of updating.
Preach.
And here's one user. Just, you look at this organization and you wonder, really, like what the fuck is going on there? Just basic design. They designed a feature on an Apple TV, one that I actually approve of and is nice. if you have multiple Apple TVs, and like one person, per billion probably have that, but okay, if you have multiple ones, there's a checkbox you set. Of course, finding the checkbox is a whole other thing. But if for some reason, some squirrel with a secret note passes by and lets you know where this fucking thing is, you check it off, and your one Apple TV will sync and have the exact same folder structures, apps down. It will mirror the device, right? And you're like, and you checked it, and it fucking works amazingly. And you're like, holy shit. Now, why would I want to have that on my iPhone and my iPads? No, I like to manually, individually redo my fucking folder structure for every one of my 85 fucking devices, because I just have pleasure in doing that all the goddamn time. No, it never happens in my soul where I think, no, I'll just give up on ever fucking organizing these applications, because I'm just going to live like a fucking animal like that. And because it's 18 billion hours of tedium doing it. And if I ever lose that structure and that backup, I'll just die, because redoing it again, I don't want to live again to do that, and to do it on 10 other devices. Why would I want that feature on multiple iPads, for example? Oh, I don't know. We'll throw that out on the fucking device that absolutely needs it the least. Awesome. Another great decision, by the way, split keyboard. I have a 12.9-inch keyboard. There's no human being that has fucking thumbs that long that isn't the product of ancient aliens, right? The one device that you really need that goddamn split keyboard? No, fuck you. That's the device we've decided not to give you a split keyboard. The mini that's this fucking big? Oh, sure, you need a split keyboard there, because it's so far to get to the fucking middle of this motherfucker. That's where we'll put it. But the big one, fuck you, motherfucker. You should type like this. Because everybody wants to type on an iPad like this. No one uses an iPad on a toilet, which is probably the number one use of fucking iPads everywhere. Just when you're grabbing somebody else's iPad, you should be aware of. But that's where they put it. And you just look at this and you're like, there is no person left. And it was clearly Steve doing all this. So whatever he got paid wasn't enough. That was saying, what the fuck is wrong with you people? How is this incoherence allowed to exist?
I absolutely agree with you. And if you want a better example of that, go search the iTunes App Store. Go search the App Store on an iPhone. It's a separate thing where you go, and search is its own deal. And on an iPad, where is search? I don't see it at the bottom like it is on my phone. That's because it's up in the top right-hand corner all the goddamn time. It is so aggravating, because it's a fundamental difference that doesn't need to exist. Like, if you're gonna do that, you put it in the corner of your phone where it can sit there all the time, because that's the one that you don't have all that real estate. Oh my God, it just makes me so angry. I understand why you would plug an iPod into iTunes. I get it. Initially, that was all there was. That was all you had to do. The whole point of iTunes was, we want to sell you a bunch of music that you put on your iPod that you will go carry around with you, which is great. Then the iPhone came out, and I'm like, well, it's going to get its own application, because they weren't apps yet. It's going to get its own application because you're going to manage that separately from iTunes, right? Wrong. Well, with the iPad, now that we have a third device that you can plug into iTunes, like, now they're going to take it out, and you're going to be able to manage your iPad in like its own thing. And they're going to split off iOS, so you only have to plug your iPod into iTunes, right? Wrong. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you movies in the music store. We're going to give you TV shows in the music store. Now we're going to sell you even more stuff that you can put on your phone, but we're going to sell it to you in the music store. This is dumb. It's the same thing they're doing with Apple Music, and that's the reason that I am so angry about Apple Music. You don't buy TV shows from music. You don't watch TV shows from music. Call it something fucking else. I don't even care what.
One, I feel kind of bad that I've gotten you irate, and it goes to show that the power of my dark force is greater than the power of your good force.
No, I have always been angry about this. It has made me so mad for so long.
Kelly, you're just wrong. Why would you ever want to check stocks on an iPad? No one would need to check stocks on an iPad, or the weather. Why would you do that? It's clearly for an iPhone. And by the way, the most natural way to edit your stock list on your Mac that comes out of Control Center is to do it through your iPhone, said the person diminishing toaster fridges. That's the way you do that, right? You add to your stock list in the cities on your weather app through your iPhone, so they come out on your Mac. It's a brilliant design. Anyway, go on and on, but it's clear this is one of the things I actually, rather than just to bitch endlessly, one of the things I noticed is Apple's failure to scale, right? I did the stats on this, and it was basically Apple used to spend 1/4 of the R&D of IBM in 2010, and they 4x now. Apple had 1/4 of the employees of IBM in 2010 when they were hitting on all cylinders, making new iPad. They updated, by the way, I forgot to mention, they also updated every iPod that year. When iPods were still a thing, in addition to all the Macs, in addition to all the software, in addition to newly releasing the iPad, they were managed to do that. But they just so they failed to scale. When you went from 2010 to now, they're doing less and less with more and more, and that's a bad thing. And I get that you lose some efficiency without having a Steve Jobs, but for it to be, what is that? Is that to be that great shows a problem. And I get it's the kind of thing that a Tim Cook should be trying to solve structurally. And that interview on the menu bar with Bob Burrow, he had some suggestions on structure issues too. And I had several, but one, they need a person that is kind of in charge of giving a fuck, basically. Yeah. When you get from folks like Bob Burrow, who were engineering level, and they were sending things, and they would get to Steve, and Steve would, kind of act on them. That's not happening. So they need a person like that has SVP level access to smack people in the face and say, no, yes, this shit has to be fixed. So that, one, a person like that. Two, they need a head of security. They got rid of a good guy that was really great in security, and it was coincidentally about a year or two, I forget his name, and we keep meaning to look it up, and Bryan and I never do. And he was a real big security. I don't know if he was at Google before or something, or an Ubuntu guy, or he was a Unix guy. He might have been a BSD dude, and he was there for a long time.
Okay, I know who you mean, and I can't think of his name either.
Yeah, and they got rid of him like 2 or 3 years right before all this shit happened with security. So what they need is another guru like that on the security level that can run QA. Not just security, but QA as well, because there's a lot of QA problems that are coming back. So those are. And
I don't want a QA guy to do QA. I want somebody who comes from it outside a little bit and maybe looks at it sideways. One of the people who's going to see a glaring error.
Well, what's
what I mean?
Thing is, this is a little bit kind of like our government. It was Bob Burrow sent in reports, like when I mentioned we mentioned another podcast. Like in iOS 7 and later, like there's pagination and formatting that was inconsistent between apps, and placement of text and use of buttons that were bad and inconsistent. And we're like, oh, no one noticed. Well, Bob noticed. Yep. And he lodged reports, and he said the difference. Yeah. Nobody gave a fuck. They just said, shut the fuck up, sit down, we don't care. And that's
that's the thing for me that sets me off so hard about iTunes, is that I want it to be better, and I know that it can be, and I know that it was. Like, that to me is the reason. It's not as much anger as it is unbelievable frustration, because I know it's been better. When it first started, iTunes was awesome. iTunes was beautiful. It handled everything in my library, 65 whopping gigabytes of music on my computer, which was astounding at the time. Like, how is it possible? So I know that this can be a better experience. I know that it has been a better experience. I know that Apple is the kind of company who can bring in the kind of brain power to make it a great experience again, to make it the kind of thing which, quite honestly, is a boring review. It's the same thing that I say about stuff when I tell people, like, it's the best and worst review that I can give you of this thing I'm telling you about, which is, it works. It does everything I want it to, and it looks nice while it does it. And that's all I wanted from it. And that's what it does. And iTunes isn't that.
It's worse than that. It's not just the things that they've added. In some ways, I would like to use Apple Music, but I don't, because I have some OCD issues, probably many OCD issues. And I have a music collection that I've built up. I like owning my own music. And this several reports from people personally that I know that have had this happen. The music came down and clobbered their music with DRM versions that come from Apple Music. Now, I know that shouldn't happen, but the point is, Apple doesn't care. Apple has gotten bad about destroying people's data. They almost act like they hate your data. They don't want you to have your own data. Our data is much better than your data. Why don't you just subscribe to this thing?
See, and like, no, because I was an iTools user. You want to know why I don't want to subscribe to all your nonsense and let you be in charge of my library and whatever the hell is on my hard drive? iTools, bitches. That's what happened to me. Like, I'm not stupid. I remember when you did that to me, and it was terrible. And I'm not going to let you do it to me again. And I don't have any reason to believe that you are any better now than you were then at doing the kind of stuff that you were doing. And why is that? Because like you, I can probably, maybe it's only on two hands, but I don't know that it's on two hands. The number of people I personally know who have had contacts hashed by iCloud Sync, documents get eaten by iCloud Sync, some sort of iCloud Drive failure that caused some sort of insurmountable issue where data was like full on just lost. Let's talk for a minute about encrypted backups, and let's talk about how I took my phone in to get the screen replaced. Nobody said the words Apple Watch to me, so I forgot to unpair it before I walked into the store. And 2.5 years of Apple Watch health data is down the drain because there's nowhere else that stuff lives besides my phone. So when they took it back there and the screen failed the calibration test and they couldn't give my phone back to me, I was screwed.
The number of times, by the way, I've told this, the quality of geniuses and tech support at Apple has gone to shit. And I kind of don't blame Apple because it's gotten so big that there just isn't a pool of the
pool of people who can do it is not. And to be fair, lots of basic stuff can be handled by people at the Apple Store competently, and it's totally fine. But some of this stuff gets tricky, and you need to have somebody who is available for that kind of thing. And I don't know that they always do.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times, and unfortunately, it's happened to people close to me. I said, "Listen, I've shit out and forgotten more than most of the geniuses are going to know. And I know what they're going to tell you, and they're going to nuke your phone. Don't go in there." And they went in there and they nuked their phone, and they're back up, and it's all over. So you have to be weary yourself. Have lots of backups is always a good thing, but anyway, I don't blame them for the quality of that going down, but there's this pattern of them like acting like they hate your data, and the latest version of it is, I think it started in Sierra, where by default, if you don't uncheck the checklist, it starts randomly off of your user account sending things to iCloud, and it won't tell you which files are there or not. This caused havoc and destroyed a lot of data. Thankfully, in the case for a couple of people, that they didn't realize it. Why would you do this? Why would you change something fundamental like where I save my data as not an opt-in, as an opt-out? It's crazy. It's crazy.
Oh my God, Becky, it is so aggravating.
Yeah. So it's just weird. And again, it goes back to my theme on Tim Cook. These are not vision things. These are operation things that he in theory should be good at, things that he in theory should hear about before it becomes a screaming, blood-curdling tortures and picks, at the castle doors.
Should have heard this. Should have been paying attention to this a year ago, because we should have had something. We should have had some sort of iTunes rumbling at this point about how it's going to change or be different or evolve or whatever. Like, if we've decided we've sort of drawn a line in the sand, as iPhones go, and we have everything before the 10 and the 10, like, we need to do the same thing on the software side as well. We need to do something about iTunes. We need to make it better. We need to make it right.
Anyway, I think we had plenty of shenanigans. And unfortunately, Bryan is not going to be able to join us back. But we had kind of a topic left that I think I have a good segue into, which tell me about your funny story with Damon Wayans.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh, I might be blushing right now. Curse you, high definition camera. Okay, so I was at Macworld. I was on a panel about getting press attention. I was writing for 2A at the time and hosting the 2A Talkcast. One moment while I pour one out over here for the 2A Talkcast. I loved it there, and I built a community there like out of nothing. There was hardly anybody that showed up regularly. There was rarely ever a guest, and Mike Rose was like, "Hey, you seem into this. Like, go see if you can get people to come on and talk to you." And I'm like, okay. And Jim Dalrymple came on, and Andy Ihnatko came on, and Gad Mayhew from Icon Factory came on, and Renee Ritchie came on, and all these people came on and talked to me who had no business like listening to like me go, hey, do you want to come spend part of your Sunday night with me chatting about, you know, whatever we decide we're going to chat about this week? And they totally did it. At that point, I wasn't anybody. I'd been writing for Tua a little bit here and there for like a year. So
let me tell you how I disagree with you. In my lifetime, the number of times I've met truly kind people in and of itself is extraordinarily small, sadly. Not the Texas kind, which is, you know, from waving from afar in a very pleasant but fake social veneer. I mean, really, really kindly people. And you could feel it. It almost comes, it's almost like a highlight on a user interface. Subtle sometimes, and not so subtle other times, but you feel it. And then when you get that group and truly insightful people not just saying the same shit that some other dumb fuck thought out of his ass and repeating it like fucking mindlessly, but people that actually put two and two together in their own head and come out with whatever answer they have. And then the Venn diagram cross section of those two, those people are rare. And when you find them, it's kind of like what I talked about, opportunities. As soon as you see those, you should understand what an opportunity it is to be near them. Grab on while you can, if you can, because it doesn't happen that often. Sadly, I wish it did, but it's rare. So all I can say is by them glomming on, it's got nothing to do with how famous or not you were. It's a credit to them to see that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Now, like, I really am blushing. But like at the time, like I didn't have like this long history of anything. So I just was sort of taking a gamble by asking people to come and talk to me, and they did. So I was on this panel at Macworld with a few other people. Jeff Gamet was on there. It was Steve Sandy's panel, and I don't remember who the other people were that were on with us. I just remember I was sitting next to Jeff and that Steve was moderating. And it was a panel about like PR and media and how do you get the press's attention and what kind of things do you say and how do you make that stuff work for you? And like, you know, that was just at the beginning of like indie developers having to all of a sudden figure out marketing for stuff because there was enough stuff in the App Store at this point that you had to pay attention. And you had to actually expend some effort so that people knew your app was out there. It wasn't like, I've scrolled through everything in the App Store. I've seen everything in the App Store. Because that's how it started. There wasn't a whole hell of a lot there.
I remember.
So, yeah, so we have this panel. And I'm sitting on it with Jeff and some other people. And all the people file in. And they all sit down. And everybody's sitting there. And I look over in the front row. And I'm like, that dude looks like Damon Wayans. Like in my brain. I'm like right over there. That looks like Damon Wayans. And like, I'm right here. And he's over there. But no. It can't be. No. And then I'm like, but if I don't say anything, then like maybe it is. Like Sinbad's here and like the guys from South Park are here and BT has been here a few times, who's like a techno guy that makes house music that I really like. So I'm like, I've like bumped into other people here who are people of note in other circles of the world, right? So it's not like it's impossible that it could be. So like in the back of my brain is turning this over like, is it or not? Is it or not? Is it or not? So we're sitting there and I don't remember. I don't remember what I said, but I said something and I made some joke about something with PR people or media people or something. And then he laughed and I'm like, okay, I know it's not Damon Wayans. There is no way I live in a universe. I am not the person who exists in the timeline where Damon Wayans laughed at a joke that I made. And then I was like, but I'm like, nope, there's no way that I live in that world. And then I do remember the second time because I was sitting next to Jeff. And one of the things that we were talking about was one of the best ways that all of us, even though we're different, because at that point, Jeff was Mac Observer and I was Tua. So we were sort of like frenemies, I guess, at that point. We were supposed to be competition, but we kind of weren't because there wasn't the explosion of all the other stuff. So I'm sitting next to Jeff and I said, you know, one of the things that I use all the time when I am interested in like what apps are out there or finding out what else is like new and interesting is I will ask other people and I will ask other writers. So I will turn to Jeff. I'm like, later I will turn to Jeff when we're having dinner and I will go, so Jeff, like what's on the first page of your iPhone? What's blowing your skirt up these days? And he goes, first, and Damon Wayans laughed. And I'm like, yep, there's no way. It can't be. It's not. And the reason I remember it is because Jeff said, how astute of you to remember that I never wear pants. So second of all, I actually do the same sort of thing. And then we had like this conversation, this little back and forth about it. So at the end of the panel, we were like, it was like time for lunch or something. And Steve said like, raise your hand if you're going to be here a little bit after the panel so that people can come up and ask you individual questions. I said I would. So I get down and immediately comes right up to me. And these are the kind of name tags where like your first name is really big and then your last name is under it smaller so that people can come up and say like, hi, John. So that because they can like know who you are. Right. He comes up and it says Damon on his name tag. And I'm like, so he comes up and he says, hi, I'm Damon, and puts out his hand like he has to introduce himself. And I'm like, okay. And I said, hi, I'm Kelly. First, I need to get this out so we can have a conversation. And that is, I am a huge fan of you and I really like the stuff that you have done. And I have to tell you that the best thing that will ever happen to me at Macworld is that I made a joke and you laughed at it. And now I can talk to you about normal stuff. What would you like to know?
And how'd he react?
That's my story. He laughed and he said, okay, well, let me ask you, because I'm working with this company on this thing and I want to find out how to get press attention. And I'm like, here's what you do.
Well, one, be Damon Wayans. That's step one.
I did tell him I'm not going to delete an email from Damon Wayans. So start there. He's like, okay. And I'm like, so that's the first thing. Like, I'm like, for you, that helps. So yeah, it was, and then he like had a follow up with me later. He was like, can I get your contact information so I can ask you some more questions? And I'm like, yeah, how am I going to not like tell Damon Wayans like, yeah, you could, here's my email address. Of course you could talk to me. And we set up a phone call later and I had a really nice conversation with him. Like after that, it was really great. So that's the story of how I made Damon Wayans laugh. And isn't that more interesting than Kelly, you're a girl in technology? That's weird.
I don't know. It's kind of like talking about oxygen around us and how useful it is, right? I see that you're on a tech podcast and you seem anyway. That was a great story. It's funny. Did you then go to all your friends like, yeah, I'm sorry, I just got off a call with Damon Wayans. I just would not just stop and just. Did you do that?
I did it to Mike Rose over at 2 because he was there and saw because he was waiting for me. We had plans like during lunch or something, so he was waiting for me to finish. And he's like, "Did you just spend 20 minutes talking to Damon Wayans?" I'm like, "You're damn right, I did. He gave me his phone number. Like, I'm gonna invite him to the 2 meetup later." And he couldn't come because he was like leaving. Like that was the next to last day of Macworld or something. So he was like, I actually have to get on a plane. So I'm really sorry I can't come, but I would be there if I was going to be in town another night. So I'm like, yeah, let me text my buddy Damon Wayans and just get him on the horn so we can have him show up at the party later.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was so fun.
I wish I got to go to any of the Macworlds. It's funny. Work always clashed with that back in the day, and I never got to go. All right, real quick, since we kind of promised it, why TV is awesome or bad? I'll tell you, I'll try to be Bryan, but I can never do Bryan's justice to some particular band. But he's like, it's great because look, there's more awesome TV like Game of Thrones or whatever other popular shit that's out there than ever, and it's getting funded more than ever. There's more vehicles to fund this kind of stuff. Actually, being a movie star is not great anymore. You want to be on one of these awesome, shows that goes for viral and whatnot. And I think that's a fair position. Here's why I think it sucks more than ever. Every fucking show is a fucking soap opera now. Every fucking show is, hey, Kelly Guimont, tech podcast girl that I happened to meet through Bryan last week, and that you had a chat with us 7 podcasts ago. Did you know that Bryan, podcaster and former musician that had an awesome band back 17 years, every fucking conversation at some point, no matter what it is, turns to that in every TV show. I want a show where nobody fucking talks the entire time. It's just fucking people doing stuff. If you can't communicate your message with all the sci-fi, all the CGI, all the tools available today, more than ever before, without giving me a soliloquy that's half the fucking show in soap opera stands, you have failed. And every show is guilty of this. Even fucking, we got dragons and shit in Game of Thrones. Yet I still have to hear a fucking soliloquy about everyone's, fourth cousin remove, as you recall, because people talk that way. Kelly, podcast girl.
So, I did tell you I'm gonna hang up with you and go record my Westworld podcast.
Oh,
and Westworld is a show that doesn't do that. Now, I can't say that it's 100% not what you want, and this is why. Because there is a lot of standing around talking or walking around talking, but they're never repeating themselves. And after you watch, and here's the thing. Right now, the reason that I have to go is because I'm going to go record with Don Melton, but it's a rewatch because we went through the whole season as it aired, and we're going back through it now. And when you go back through it, having watched it all the way through, and knowing what you know at the end versus what you know at the beginning, because at the beginning you don't know anything, it's a completely different experience. It's the Sixth Sense. When you watch the Sixth Sense the second time, it's that.
I watched Westworld, and what I think you should totally concentrate on is two things. One, it's awesome that in the future with these sophisticated abilities, there's no Wi-Fi or GPS for these incredible walking, human automatons. So you don't know where they go. They just go off grid. That's awesome. And two, what programmers often do when they're programming AI is they say, shit that's randomly deleted inside storage, just pull that and use that for execution. They do that all the time. It's like, I fucking love just pulling in random stuff. Yeah, just send it through the fucking processing pipeline. That's totally realistic. I don't get
in this case it is, and I have a whole episode about why.
All right. Well, I guess maybe I need to watch it, but as far as it being realistic for the way they describe that they're pulling that data, it's one of those pet peeves of when you know too much of how real shit gets done, you're like, dude, come on.
But I did like that they gave enough of an explanation so that people like us would listen to it and it would at least check out. Is it a good idea is very different from is it possible, which is we erased all the references to the stuff, but the stuff is still there. Just because you nuke the catalog file doesn't mean that the files aren't still there if you know how to recover them. That's legit. And that's all I'm saying is that it was at least a legitimate thing that held up. And there's never a point in Westworld where somebody's typing in front of a screen and the screen is reflected back on their face.
So Kelly, we disagree on this, and I'll tell you why. Because first of all, it's known that whenever you hack, that you're like, that's the only way you know you're seriously hacking. If you get flying on the fucking screen, then you're really fucking hacking, right? That's the sign of true hacking on a TV show. And I'll give credit to a show, Mr. Robot, who treats hacking much more realistically, and it's still ultra compelling. So this fucking, again, in a world where we have more resources than ever to make things compelling and explain them, it's total lazy shit writing. To fall into these traps of I just fucking executing random deleted code because that's the way we do it. That's that little
so specifically
of hackerdom in the way we execute stuff. So I find that to be lazy writing. But there you go.
Well, at least in this specific case, the thing about it is that I personally am willing to give it a pass because that's not the point of the story. So to me, it's not as big a deal as it would be if that were the focus of what was going on. And it's not, it's a piece. So to me, I don't mind so much that it's not, that I like that it holds up to a cursory explanation. Legitimately, that's the way hard drives work. I get that. So that's all you need to tell me because that's the way it is in real life. And so as far as I'm concerned, that's all I needed because all the other stuff that goes on in that show and all the other stuff it makes me think about is what reeled me in.
Yeah, the bigger questions that it asks are the more interesting questions. And if that's its only sin, it's not a bad sin. And on that, I can agree. Anyway, I got a quick pick.
Yes.
If you are looking for, it does so much more. It is the spiritual child of Quick Keys, which is no longer in production because the programmer died, and the company that bought the software couldn't get a programmer to understand what the programmer did. Keyboard Maestro does most, if not more, than the things that actually Quick Keys used to do. It just does a ton of stuff. And if you were a person that at one point used Quick Keys a lot, this is your app.
Yes.
To be fair, and what's your pick other than to mock me for not knowing this basic shit?
Well, yeah.
That's fuck me.
No, my pick is something that you could have used while you were gone, and that is a little smart. It's called a smart alarm, I think they call it, and it's called Leo, and that's Leo. And here's why it's great. It's a little round device. It's about the size of an Amazon Dot ish, and it's a little white plastic thing that you plug into a power outlet, into a power socket, and that's all it does. And it's got a little ring of light around the outside, but here's where the magic happens. So it can be a nightlight if you want it, and it has a mobile app, but what it does is it listens for alarms in your house. So if you have a water alarm, like you have one of those water sensor alarm things that you put like around your water heater to make sure your water heater doesn't start leaking or something, or around the wash machine, it listens for the sound that makes, and it listens for the carbon monoxide detector and the smoke detector in your house. And if it hears something that it thinks is that, it will alert you in the app. And if you don't do anything within, I think it's like 15 seconds or 30 seconds in the app, it will call you. And it will call you and it will say, I have detected an alarm. This is Leo. I have detected an alarm in your house. Here's what it sounds like. And it plays it for you. And then it asks you, is this real or not? So that it can help figure out, this is the machine learning you were talking about before. Is this an alarm or not? And then you can figure it out. So it will also monitor the temperature and the humidity in the area that it's in. So suppose you have one and you're not home and your smoke detector goes off. It will call you and tell you like your smoke detector is going off. What do you want me to do? And I think that that's super great. I love it. Each of my sets of parents have one because they have places that they go for extended periods of time. So this allows them to sort of keep tabs on the house when they're not there, because all they have to do is install an app and they can look at it and it will say where the Leo is right now. It's 68 degrees and it's 68 degrees and it's 40% humidity. Everything's fine. And they can always like monitor that. And the reason this is great is because one time while my dad was gone, the power blinked and it turned on the fireplace. He has one of those plug-in fireplaces. So it came on and it was on for like 2 days. And then their neighbor went and like opened the door to drop off the mail, and the heat had been on high for like 2 days. So opened the door and was like, it is so hot. And so like they were able to like sort it out and everything. But it would have saved a bunch of hassle if this thing had just been like, it's above 70 degrees in the house. And then my dad could have called the neighbor and been like, can you go take a look? Like, there's no reason it should be above 70 while we're not there. So that's what it is. It's super great. They're like $50. You can adjust the color of the light and the brightness of the light. So you can turn it down if you don't like it, or if you like a night light, you can put it in the hallway and whatever. And it's super great to have. It's one of those where if you don't want to have to need it, but if you do, like, boy, howdy, am I glad it's there.
It's a super awesome device. I imagine if you're really getting into automation, and one of my buddies, Walter, is, so I'm going to definitely pass this on to him, because a lot of devices and sensor types, particularly these water ones, there's no awesome solution. Like there's no yet HomeKit version of a water sensor that is really great. There's one that kind of, well, without getting into the details, but with all these other devices that you don't have something for, this acts as a bridge for it, because it could pick up on any of them, because it's just listening for, it sounds like, right, and the haulers and stuff. That's
it's like not automation. Like that's the great thing about it. It doesn't come with another stupid hub for you to have to connect to anything. It's pretty great.
Nice. That's a great pick. Well, Kelly, unfortunately, Bryan is not here to be the better half of our duo, but he wishes to thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on to the show again. I don't know why you would do it, but it was really nice talking to you and hearing your thoughts on stuff. And do you have anything to plug, or your Twitter address or anything like that for all three of our listeners?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Twitter as Verso, and you can, in the summertime, you can find me doing stuff with App Camp for Girls, which teaches iOS development to girls going into 8th and 9th grade. And we are entering our 6th year of camps and expanding to a new city this summer. We're expanding to Minneapolis, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're a certified nonprofit, so your donation is tax deductible, while donations to tax deductible organizations are still a thing. So if you wanted to do that, you could. And I will make you, John, the same deal that I made everybody who listened on the menu bar, which is if you make a donation of more than $10 and you get my attention on Twitter, I will, and show me your proof of donation, I will send you App Camp related treats. I don't know what they'll be yet. They're not going out until later this week, but I swear to you, I will send you something.
That's super nice. Unfortunately, our audience is probably, my two cousins and my girlfriend. So it's not as big a pool, but
$30.
And it's an awesome thing that you helped found. It's just I gotta think that's gotta be, I don't know if it were, I can only try to live vicariously through imagining, but it's gotta be a super satisfying thing to be involved with, and knowing that you helped found that. It's a phenomenal, I don't even want to call it, I don't know if the service, it's just a phenomenal thing. It's a phenomenal kind of community thing that kind of just advances humanity in a good way. So super congrats on that. And it by all means, not that opinion of this idiot means anything, but it's a phenomenal thing to donate to. It's just doing all kinds of good. And it really, it's a, what I always bitch about here, there are few charities to give to where you feel like your money is going to do any good, because like the administration eats up like 90% of it. This is a scenario where there are kids that are absolutely going to learn, or girls that are going to learn, and whether or not they do this as a vocation has got nothing to do with it. It gives people a whole new way of thinking, not just kind of in language ways, but a whole new way of seeing themselves, and feeling that there are things they can do that are bigger than themselves, things that they never thought they might be able to do. And that's a profound thing to give to people. So a fantastic, I want to say charity, just a fantastic community to help along. So awesome. All right. Well, thank all of our dear viewers, Ancient and Rick. Thank you so much for all the comments. I'm sorry I couldn't get to them all, but with Bryan gone, I have the capacity of a small gnat on keeping attention to things. But thanks to everybody for joining. If you like the show, I don't know what's wrong with you, but feel free to click the subscribe button. And on those popular topics, we will see you next week, hopefully. And Bryan will be back, and he'll explain what happened, or not.
I was hoping.